Freedom Riders is the story of 12 people, both black and white, who in 1961 decide that they're going to test the segregation laws in the South by just getting on Greyhound bus and Trailways buses and going down south and sitting together on the buses, eating together in the bus stations. The white people would use the colored-only bathrooms. The African Americans would use the white-only bathrooms, and they would kind of just see what would happen.
I'm on my way.
I'm sorry, our management does not allow us to serve niggers in here.
The documentary is based in part on the book Freedom Riders, written by the author Raymond Arsenault. So he spent almost 10 years tracking down Freedom Riders. So we were able to work with him as a strong resource to find many people, and it was up to us as documentary filmmakers to, since there's over 400 Freedom Riders, we had the sort of difficult task of whittling down those people to make the film. And how we did that was really stick to the chronology of the rides. We had to have people on the first ride. They were a unique, special group. There were only about a dozen of them, and there were only about half of them living. So we had to find them. And then from there on, we needed to find riders that sort of picked up the ride in the different phases of the ride.
This young lady next to me, Joan Trumpauer at the time, Joan Mulholland now, and I started out with a group called the DC Nonviolent Action Group, which staged sit-ins in Virginia and Maryland. We had done that in 1960, but when the Freedom Ride got to Anniston, the bus was burned. We were not a part of the initial grouping that went from Washington on the first segment. But when they decided to stop the ride because of the violence, the call went out for persons who were members of SNCC or allied with SNCC to come and join the ride to keep it going. I
was attracted to the topic for a lot of reasons. It's a great story. It's just an incredible, incredible story. It's one of those kind of stories where, people say Freedom Riders, I think I know what that is, but they don't really. And it's in a great period because a lot of the people who were involved are still alive, and there's also film, video, and stills to illustrate the story. So, and it's really dramatic, and it's an incredible story of the human spirit.
But one of the many challenges in working on the documentary was archival material. This is a historical piece. Since it really takes place in 1961, a lot of the so-called infamous or famous images from the civil rights era hadn't happened yet. We were before all of that. We were before the civil rights movement really becomes a full-fledged identified movement with full-fledged identified icons and characters. It's really a time when everyone is forming themselves and forming the lexicon that will become the civil rights movement. So that meant a lot of archives were lost or hidden away in attics or file cabinets or people's bedrooms. I mean, literally, archive was everywhere, and it was our task to spend so much time trying to track it down.
It was pretty complicated trying to find visuals for it, but we were really lucky because Johnson Publications, that does Ebony and Jet, I think for one of the first times in their history agreed to sell us stills, and they were great to work with. They were one of the only people that had a cameraman. They had a cameraman who went along on the Freedom Rides.
I was called by Mr. Simeon Booker of Jet magazine that he wanted me to take a trip with him, and it was the Freedom Riders. I had no idea what it was, but I said I'm ready to go because when I was in the Army, I didn't like sitting in the back of the bus and paying the same fare. If they had made the seats cheaper, then there wouldn't be any place back there for the black people because the white people would be back there. And that's why I went on the Freedom Ride.
And you managed to capture some really amazing images, I understand.
Oh, I made quite a few pictures, but I couldn't let them know that I was a photographer because I would have been beaten real bad because they didn't want no publicity out. I remember seeing the photographer when they had the Little Rock 9, how they beat him, and I knew that would happen to me. I had a 4x5 camera, but when I got to North Carolina, something said, you better send it back. I sent that camera back and used a 35mm camera.
The idea of going into Mississippi and going into Alabama and challenging segregation so frontally is something that alarmed not only those who oppose civil rights, but those within the civil rights community.
I don't question their legal right to travel, but I question their wisdom.
This certainly isn't, oh, take your medicine and watch this is good for you. You know, we really hope that it becomes an engaging story to honor and commemorate their heroism, but also maybe more importantly to show particularly young people that you yourself have more power than you think you may have. These are just individual students who literally wrote wills and testaments that on the night before they left on the ride, like they were willing to die. They saw that, you know what, I may die, I may never come back, I may never finish college, I may never see my family again. They were willing to make that commitment, and they were average citizens who did an incredibly extraordinary thing. So I think that's the biggest message we can tell young people with all of the resources that they have today of social media, of, you know, from Facebook pages to Twittering. You know, they can stay connected with themselves to either end or stop gang violence, perhaps, or bullying, or, you know, clean up environmentally plagued neighborhoods. I mean, you can use these tools just like they did in 1961 to help make your community and your life better. Don't sit around and wait for the next icon for you to follow. You know, take charge of your life and take a stand.
Buses are a-coming, oh yes. Buses are a-coming, oh yes.
Your parents tell you, don't start something that you can't finish. Finish it.